Art yourself alive. Art yourself alive. Art yourself alive. Art yourself alive. Art Yourself Alive podcast with your host Vikki Parker, sharing lived experience stories of the power of creativity to support your mental health and well-being. So welcome to this episode of the Art Yourself Alive podcast. And today I am so excited to bring you one of my really good friends, an amazing creatrix, creative firestarter is what she likes to call herself, my lovely friend, Moyra Scott. Now, Moyra Scott is a coach and an artist, and she is the creator of wild art journaling and wild painting, of which I have had the deepest pleasure to get involved in. Absolutely wonderful practice. So just to say hello, Moyra, how are you?
Hello. Yeah, I'm really well. Thank you, Vikki. Lovely to be here.
Oh, it's so nice to have you. I've been wanting to interview you for ages. So as you know, this podcast is about connecting us to our absolute innate understanding of how creativity can support you in your well-being with your mental health, and just how the purity of creative process, which you understand so well in such basic and messy and chaotic and lovely terms with your wild art journaling, is to get to that root of where that essence starts for all of us, and remind us all of those wonderful memories that we may have had as a child, and talk about play and talk about the origins of the creativity within ourselves. So I would love you, Moyra, to just tell me, what are your favorite memories of when you were a kid, when you were playing?
I was thinking about this earlier, of course, Vikki, and I think about, when I first think about playing, I'm kind of going back really early, is in making mud pies and mixing up spells, as I used to call them, in buckets. So like putting in all sorts of gubbins, mostly mud, but sticks, spiders' webs, this kind of thing, and kind of getting really messy and doing that, and having just being completely absorbed in doing that. So that's kind of really early, pretty young. When I think about the kind of creativity stuff I used to do quite prolifically, it's probably a little bit older, sort of, the 9, 10, 11, 12 kind of mark. And I think that's a sort of peak age for that kind of thing. And I used to do so many different things, actually. I used to love doing things with fabric. So I did patchwork a lot. And so patchwork and crochet and weaving I did. But the thing that I really got into in a big way, and I must have been about 12 and a half when I was doing this, it was like I took all summer building like a paper theatre. So it was in a box, and it had sort of, like sets that would go back, and we'd put torches in at the top, and I made these paper puppets. But building that little world of sort of lights, music, and sort of layers of scenery, I just got completely absorbed in that. And I've still got, like, I'd love to just spend my time making paper theatres, completely pointless, really. But like, I just loved it. I love creating those little worlds.
Wow, they sound amazing. And what?
Yeah, they don't exist. Well, what happened was, so I would create little puppets as well, and then I'd put on shows. So that was, I used to do kind of quite a few puppet shows, actually, but this kind of creating the whole theatre. So it would have you could see, if you looked into it from the back, there'd be little holes, and then you'd see the backs of the heads, and it would go down to the kind of stage front. And then, so I put on shows, and I'd have like torches with tissue paper, and I'd play music, and generally kind of dance shows, because there'd be music and a little performance by whatever. I seem to remember a little Russian puppet that danced to Russian music. I can't remember the rest, but that's mainly what happened in there.
Love that. And what inspired you to do that?
Yeah, it is quite specific, because my mom had, and I guess still has somewhere, and it was a little bit of a family heirloom, because it's from the 1951 exhibition in London, the Great Exhibition. I think it was 1851 rather. So like the Great Exhibition, and I think that's when it was, maybe it's 1871, I don't know, it was Victorian. So it's like it comes in a sort of like thing, and you undo and it expands like a kind of concertina, and then you look in it and it was like this kind of paper model of the exhibition that you could look down. It's a big glass dome and sort of all the different things kind of going down it. So it was that really that inspired me to want to make my own.
Wow. And I love that phrase that you use, that you make this little world and you get absorbed in this little world. I mean, what's beneficial about that experience for you to make a little world for yourself?
I think art is creating a little world, perhaps. It's, yes, a little alternate reality that's being created, and you can go spend time in it.
And isn't it lovely to just go and spend the time in it?
Oh, totally. That's kind of like realizing what it's all about, really. And there's so many different ways of like spending time in it, in the alternate reality of creativity. There's, there's two aspects of it. There's, I literally created another little world with the theatre. And part of what I love doing, really, and it's only really because of lockdown, when it was removed and now sort of being reinstated again, the sort of bringing of people together and creating like events, really, or happenings where people gather is part, and I'm realizing this really is part of what I love to do. So creating an experience is part of that. And then there's, on a personal level, dropping into creative flow, which is a place I really like to spend time in as well, and is a little alternate world, but it's slightly different. One's kind of creating a world and being involved in that. I've always loved fancy dress parties, sort of decorating rooms, creating kind of meals with, decorations and things like that. So that's part of this sort of scene setting, really, that I still enjoy.
Yeah, scene setting. And you really do that in your workshops as well. Actually, you do really create a little world, and I can see now, knowing that in your background, I can see how you take the approach when you do your wild art journaling, because it has many layers to it. It's not just one image. There are literally layers and layers and layers of things that you ask the person to immerse themselves in, from all different kinds of strands, from the writing and the visuals to the making, to the cutting, to the pasting. I can really see now how that's come together for you, because I always wondered why you were so drawn to the collaging and the ripping and the paper. And now you've given me some background like that. That's really interesting. Yes, that's really interesting.
I think I'm just having a bit of a realization now. I've always been fascinated by layers, and so patchwork is a kind of layering, and there's not, I'm not the only one actually, but things that used to really fascinate me were not maybe childhood, but sort of early sort of teen sort of era, was when you've got lots of posters on a wall or wallpaper that's been papered over, and you kind of get the little corner that comes up, and you can see that underneath one wallpaper there's a different wallpaper, and underneath that there's another one, or underneath the poster there's these layers of posters. Always loved that. So the layers thing is sort of going back through things is definitely part of my creative process as an artist.
Yeah, because you do that with your own art as well, don't you? Your own art practice is very much based on secrets and things that are hidden behind. Yeah, because I remember when we worked together on one of my events, and you created that amazing painting for me in collaboration with the people that were in the workshop. I had all the pictures of all of the layers and as it built, and it's fascinating to watch what people did right and what people did stick, and then how it ended up on the painting. Absolutely wonderful. And I do love that when I saw some of your paintings in your collection. Was it the Enchanted Forest collection? The one that you called, and you wrote all of those stories on the canvases underneath, and we know that they're there, but we know that they're infusing a different kind of magical essence through the paint, and just completely enhancing the whole gorgeousness of it all. I love that. Oh, that's really interesting. So I'm also fascinated by your mud pie story too. That really does take me back as well. Growing up in Yorkshire, growing up with the woods, and being in mud, you know.
And fire, that's, I mean, it was slightly not kind of like quite so young, but as a small, you know, as a young child, must have been over 9, because we moved to Suffolk when I was 9. Digging holes and lighting fires in those holes was, I love lighting fires.
Yeah.
I called myself a fire starter earlier.
Yeah.
Well, I really do love lighting fires.
No, I'm the same. I'm totally the same. I'm just getting a sense of something's just coming through for me about mess and chaos and destruction and ripping and burning and clearing and cleansing. And actually that really is a fundamental part of your practice as well, isn't it? That's how I'm seeing you now for the first time, actually. Isn't that fascinating?
It's all fascinating, Vikki. I'm finding this fascinating myself. It's like, oh yes, there's a thread there. I didn't know.
But yeah, I mean, the reason why I am drawn at times to the wild art journaling is because of that destructive, chaotic, ripping, piecing together, rearranging kind of process. And it doesn't always draw me, actually, because that's not part of my practice. And I really have to get into a headspace to do that. And I've always asked myself why I've had to get into a specific headspace to do that, because I watch you and you do it so freely, and it's just so fundamental to you with your hair dryer and your glue and your all of the different layers and painting over it. And I'm like, gosh, that is a freedom that actually I don't always tap into. I have other freedoms, but that seems to be a freedom that I would like more of.
It's designed kind of like to support that desire for that kind of freedom, for sure. And it's, for a creative person, many people struggle with destroying what they've done. And this is the wild art journaling really specifically, or some of the processes that I do. So it's about letting go. And there's a writing term called kill your darlings. And if you write it, people know, I don't know, maybe you don't know that, but it's about, sometimes you can get really stuck at a level because you really, really like something. But until you get rid of it, the rest of it can't come. So yeah, it's in writing, it's called kill your darlings. There's a phrase and you just love it. You think it's so poetic, and it's just that actually that's the thing that's blocking you from getting the rest of it to kind of come together. So with the layers and the kind of moving through it and sort of ruining something, perhaps, there's absolute freedom sort of that comes from that. And then you loosen up, you see, because you can get stuck in little patterns, I think, and you want to kind of stick to what you know. And that's, I like kind of crashing through that, destroy that, and like, let's kind of like move on and kind of get to the other side of that. And that's when when you can let go like that, you're very free.
Yeah. And do you think that was a natural state of being for you from your childhood play, or is that something that you embraced because you needed that?
I think it's fairly natural to me, actually, although not saying that I don't get stuck. And when I get stuck, I tend to destroy something. I'm not saying I can break things. So destroying a painting could be just, you know, putting a big red blob in a corner, you know, just doing something dramatic to it to shift the energy. So, I mean, for me, being stuck in your creative practice, really interesting space to kind of be in. And I was very inspired by, I think it's Zen and the Art of Motorcycle Maintenance. And in that, he says being stuck is amazing, because that's what Buddhist martyrs or Zen masters have been trying to get to, the idea, you know, that point of having no ideas. That's what they spend their whole life trying to have nothing come up in their brain. It's really actually very hard. If you just like look at something, you'll find all sorts of ideas. If you really are stuck, there's all sorts of things that you could do, and it's quite difficult to stop them coming out. But being stuck, it's kind of a really interesting place, because that's where you're probably going round and round and round. It's like looking for something and thinking, well, I put them there, so they must be there. And you keep looking in the same place where they're not, and you can't find them. So, you know, it's about doing something differently and sort of moving on and kind of creating a whole new world for yourself by doing so.
And the symbolism of that is so wonderful, isn't it, in terms of how you can just approach life?
Yeah, because you can just butt up against a kind of brick wall, trying to do something in the way that you thought it needed to be done, when in fact, if you just, you know, turned to your left, there'd be like, there's no wall, you can just go that way.
Getting even more inspired just listening to you now, thinking, okay, what have I drawn or what have I painted recently that I could just take that approach with and go, right, that's going across it and I'm going to change the whole direction.
Yeah.
I'd love that. I mean, I do that myself because I turn paintings round constantly. The minute I feel like I can see something literal appearing in it, I will turn it round so that I am no longer following that path. Yeah.
It's a similar thing. It's disruption to the kind of like patterns in a way.
Yeah.
And again, it's like world art journaling, especially if I'm in a room with people, I start off quite bossy, and I'm kind of like, some of the things I'm doing, they're deliberately disruptive to stop people going down a sort of little unique pattern. And by doing that, you can't think ahead. So the whole, I am doing this and I am going in this direction and this is the outcome I'm going to get. And the outcome I'm going to get isn't going to be quite as good as the thing in my head often, because you've got this idea and you want it to kind of actually happen. For me, it's about getting lost in the, not lost, not the right word, but in the being in the process. Because when you don't know quite what's happening, or you've had your kind of path disrupted, you're kind of like, oh, I'm here. And then you have to work with what is, and working with what is and being very present. That's when you get to the source of creativity. It's like that point where you're so present, but there's no plans. So you don't know what's going to happen. And you have to make it up, right? Pure creativity. You're making it up as you go along. And that's kind of creative flow, really, to me. Literally just being sort of immersed in it, making it up along, like discovering as you go. I think it's sort of like improvising, or kind of, but being in the groove with improvising.
And it just promotes such flexibility of thinking and being, and that whole presence and letting go in the moment. Such an amazing skill to have. And you said, like you say, many Buddhist masters or many other kind of philosophical thinkers have been trying to find that way of just being able to approach life in a way that can help you thrive and help you move through and help you accept what is. And I'm remembering the Buddhist thinking that pain is inevitable and suffering is optional, because suffering happens when you are in resistance to what is, and you're wanting to change it, and you're in the world of should, and you're in the world of, needing that not to be as it is. When in actual fact, if you just come to it in that moment, you're right about that portal that it takes you into, which is so rich and so deep, isn't it? And it can really bring a flourishing of new ideas and different perspectives and ways of just embracing and accepting.
And it's if you get to kind of like what is, often just by really slow, just being in that and really being immersed in what actually is, you can see the way that needs to happen next without really having to sort of think about it or plan about it. I suppose that's it. And that's flow state. It's being like, that's what is, and just looking at it and being with it, and then going, right, yellow here, there we go, or some blue dots or whatever. And sometimes you get stuck, and that's the thing. I think it's the movement or the doing of something. Because when you're stuck, it's like inertia, and that requires a force to kind of move it. Whereas if you've got momentum, it's requires something to resist it, to stop it.
That takes us really neatly on to life challenges, I think. If we're looking at the backdrop of that skill set that you already have, that you've learned over many decades, and thinking about how you approach things in your life right now, I wonder, is there a challenge that you would like to share with the listeners, which can, show us how you've been able to approach something with your mindset and your, creative ways that's been able to support you?
I think for me, art journaling has been created really as a way of processing, I suppose. So I haven't really, there's not specific challenges because I use it quite such a lot, but like it's for any challenge, I'm going to use, there's a couple of examples that I definitely used it and it definitely helped. But for me, it's like, if I am really upset or angry or discombobulated or out of sorts, for me, doing the world art journaling process, it's like it starts off. So the process is free writing. So you're just writing out what's in your head. So you just get it all out onto the paper. So it's like this kind of, it comes out of your head and onto the paper, and then you cover it up in the layers in so many different various ways that you can do that, but that's essentially what you're doing. You're covering it up in layers and kind of moving through these layers and sort of working with what you've got in front of you. And by doing that process, there'll be some point where I'm just immersed in the process and I realize I've completely forgotten. It's not like I've forgotten what I was upset about or anything. It's just that it doesn't matter anymore. I don't feel all the feelings. And it's like this, I know what I'm going to share with you actually. So it's like a kind of processing that happens. You get the words out, then you let them go, you let them go, you let them go, you let go of what you're doing, let go. And then sort of suddenly you realize it's just not a problem. And it's like I've spent time in somewhere that's taken away that thing. So the example I'm going to share with you, and I might have shared it with you before, but it's just quite funny. All right, so it's not a tragic one. We were talking about there's tragic ones as well, but this one's kind of more funny. So I was very annoyed with my husband. We were having an argument about washing up, which had been one of those ongoing little arguments about washing up that sometimes still rears its head. I don't know what it is, but it's not about washing up, right? It's kind of, it always becomes more than just about washing up. It becomes about all sorts of things. But that's just the little focal point from it. So I was doing wild art journaling. So the general writing was like ranting about, I don't know, the plates being left on the table or had not been washed up properly or whatever it was. And all was like, kind of writing it out. And then, forgot all about it. Got into kind of like color and layers and sort of like wandering around in this kind of like lovely place, just immersed in flow, just dealing with what is. And then sort of towards the end of art journaling, and I was doing this in a group actually, so nobody knew what I'd written. So you like right at the end, so we kind of like come back to words, and sometimes those words are like an answer, sometimes they're complete nonsense, but it doesn't really matter. You're not kind of attached to it. Anyway, the words that came through at the end of that session, may I swear? There's swearing involved in this.
Go on then.
Okay, you can bleep me out if you need one. The words were, buy a fucking dishwasher. Excuse my language. So, and I have to say, bloody amazing. Bloody love that dishwasher. Absolutely marvelous. But it's really simple and silly, but that's the kind of the process. You can go and be all caught up in all the thoughts and the thinking and that about it. I don't know what to do and all of that. And then you sort of like gradually just like it all just like goes, and you're just there, sticking paper, putting some blue, some yellow, whatever, and just being in that space. And it's like, well, creativity, I'm sure involves your whole brain. It's a different way of thinking. Actually, it's a kind of non-verbal kind of way of your brain's connecting all over the place. It's not just in your prefrontal cortex. It's not just verbal. It's not just planning. Everything's connected. You can have little insights or ping around and connect things together in ways you hadn't thought of. It's like kind of coming about this, that you can have little insights actually. And like sometimes they don't make sense at the time. I'll just write down some what I think are random words, and like looking back, it can be, oh right, yeah, okay, that's quite deep. That actually sums up that whole thing. And so I was kind of talking about like this, could be some more, sadder things. So my dad died last year, and while he was dying, he had cancer, and we were, because of lockdown, able to sort of be there with him, which was, lovely that we could be there with him. Not lovely in the context, obviously, but the world art journey I did during that time, it was a very calm place. It was a lovely place for me to kind of go. So it's like solace in a way to be immersed in this world, not thinking. And I think there's something about that. It's not wordy thinking. It's not the same as churning thoughts. It's very different kind of thinking, sort of being type of thinking. Anyway, non-verbal. And then but looking back at the work that I produced then, it's quite, it looks like, what can I say? Some of the words like, holding on and lost at sea and that sort of thing. And it wasn't in reference to that context, but afterwards, it was how I felt, genuinely sort of expressing that and being able to do that through that process.
Yeah, no, thank you for sharing that. And I think it's really important actually that you gave us two examples there, one of real everyday challenges, because this podcast is not just about, inviting someone on to tell a tragic life story. That's not what this is about. Challenges can come in the smallest of episodes, but in actual fact, to be really aligned with you, there are so many layers beneath what we might even perceive to be a simple challenge. I mean, my first question would be, how many years did you argue about the washing up before you reached that pinnacle point of just like finding a solution for yourself by buying a bloody dishwasher?
I know, it's hilarious, isn't it? It's like, it's not complicated. Actually, it's hilarious.
There comes a time,
years,
probably years. Yeah, there comes a time for you to give yourself permission. It's like, did you need the fight for just that period of time, and then were you just ready to give up the fight for it? Do you know what I mean? Like, it can be. I
couldn't explain it. Obviously, it was the answer. It was, just right. Instead of getting caught up in it, because when you're in it, you can't see sense really, because it's all about how annoying the other person is. Yeah. Right.
Absolutely. It's all the projection
and how it's not fair and this, that, and the other. And if only they could see it this way and all of that business. Yeah. But in fact, there's a solution. It's like we were saying, it's like you're up against a brick wall, you're banging your head against it. Why won't this wall get out of the way? But if you look sideways, there's something else, and it's right, of course, that there all along, simple solution.
But we move, like I say, we move into those positions within our own understanding of ourselves when the time is right. And that's to say, to reiterate again, there is no small challenge, and everything that we're doing has some kind of story attached to it. And when we notice the story, we can let it then fall away. When we can just own the story, we can see the parameters of that story, and go, asking that insightful question of yourself. What is it about that story that's been serving me for so long? And am I ready to give up that? And I love that. I love that about the wild art journaling, because you can come to that understanding about the things in that process, and you get rid of all of your excess energy, and you have a space to place the intensity of feeling that might have been clouding your thinking and more, like proactive, productive mind, and it's all of that cutting and sticking and stuff like that. There's
ripping, so and it's like, we get destruction. It's like
totally destroying it. And it really does get rid of that, stuff that's stuck. It really does get you energized and in it and embodied in it. And that's really important, isn't it? To get really embodied in it.
For me, it's like, and it is letting go of the verbal, I think, to an extent. It's like it becomes not about words.
Yeah.
And that's a different part, or it's a different way of thinking, which is that used to be kind of like designed it up like the left and right brain. Apparently that's just not true, but it's a very handy kind of metaphor for the different ways of thinking. And the right brain, which one's which, I can't remember. Left brain, I think, is the kind of logical, kind of methodical, do one thing at a time. Prefrontal cortex, like part of your brain that does all of that thinking, deciding, differentiating, measuring, all of that stuff. It's quite small, and sometimes it doesn't know the answer. But sometimes if you let all of your experience and everything all connect at once by being immersed in being embodied in some way, for me that would be like, the cutting and the sticking and the kind of the colors and the all of that, and the placing of things, and quite visual, so that works for me. But then you have insight.
And I know that you really, really took it to the next level over the last couple of years, when we've been, literally stuck in so many ways. And this process has been able to, you've applied it in so many areas and held groups for people. And could you want to describe a little bit of that journey around how the wild art journaling process maybe transformed for you over the last couple of years?
Yes, because obviously I couldn't have a group of people in a room together. So, and initially I had all of the work I had, which was all involved in it was that side and some other work, all to do with being in a room with people. So I do coaching as well, coaching and facilitation. So I was doing that all with groups of people in a room. All of it stopped. And it was as a way of connecting with people. I thought, I'm just like, every week I'm going to go live, and well, I think I did it in Zoom. Anyone could come, and it was free because I just wanted to connect with people. And I'll share my art journaling process, and you can come join in or if you don't want to do that, you could do whatever creative practice that you do. We've got some time for it. Let's all do it together. And so this sort of creating together sort of aspect of it, which is something I was really missing as well. And so I started off doing it just as a kind of free thing, and then realized, oh, actually I don't have any income. So I asked for donations, and yeah, it was great. I had people from all over the world come and sort of be creative together. And then sort of as the kind of first lockdown anyway, ended, I sort of turned it into a membership. So we meet, and we sort of meet every week, and we have done since it started on a Friday, moved to a Sunday, and in lockdown at that time. And we've, every week there's a bunch of us who just do wild art journaling together. We've kind of developed a little rhythm with it. I say it's a rhythm because we don't do the same things every time. What we do now is we have random prompts for the layers. If it sparks some kind of thing with you, you go with it. If you don't, it doesn't. And the randomness is generated because everybody in the group brings the prompts. It's like, give us a prompt, and they might say blue spots, they might say impossible, or it's like, really, some of it's like pick the color that's nearest to you, sort of directional type of thing. Some of it's really abstract, like, yes, what does time look like, for example, as one of them. And that means that you don't, and it keeps you in that kind of, or keeps me and everyone in the room, we don't know quite what's going to happen. And you respond to what is, and you follow your creative flow with it. So sometimes people can just get stuck on just one level of kind of creating something, or sometimes they do all the layers and see what happens at the end of it.
I'm really interested to ask you, actually, was there a time over the last couple of years where you really experienced a different kind of stuckness because of our situation that we were all in?
No, I don't know if I did. I missed people really a lot. And I do remember one evening, it was meant to be a friend's 50th birthday party. So instead of that, we had this Zoom party, and I was stood all dressed up, like as if to go to a party, in a corner of my bedroom. And there was somebody, she did it really well. She had a magician who was amazing, and then this woman who sort of taught us dance moves. And there was just this little moment when I suddenly caught myself, like, I'm standing in a corner of my bedroom dancing on my own. And it was just sort of awful. I felt just so alone and separated from everyone. With that sort of little moment of just being there on my own, sort of dancing away, like, what am I doing?
Yeah, I can totally relate to that.
Yeah. And then the second, I don't know which one was, in January, when we didn't have Christmas and we were expecting it, and then it was just miserable, dark, and it was all a bit unbearable at that point. And then my dad got cancer. So it was all a bit like, what the fuck, man? This is all a bit much. Anyway, It was a bit like everyone, even in the streets, the beginning lockdown was quite exciting. And, the clapping and the kind of camaraderie on our street was really quite magical, actually. And then that one in January, it was just like everyone would just, it's like, it was all too much. Just like, I'm just going one foot in front of the other. That's all I can do right now. It was quite grueling.
Yeah, so we actually had really different experiences then, because I remember that because of where you live in Brighton, you really had that opportunity to have the community of your street to be kept going. And I remember just being
improved.
Yes, honestly. Absolutely. You built the connections physically, and you were building them online on your Zoom. And I remember the first 3 months, I was completely alone in my house, and I didn't touch another human being for 3 months. So it was completely isolating for me. And I remember coming to your Zoom and going to other people's Zooms and negotiating this new, very strange world of seeing people in boxes. And even though we'd been on Zoom before, And I remember that actually being the catalyst for me. The complete isolation was the catalyst for me to go even deeper into my own artwork. And that was actually the gift for me, to remove all external connection to anything. And it took me down a very, very deep path. And it took me into really understanding the artwork that I was doing and how that was healing me, because it was so deep and it was so spiritual. And the whole global situation allowed me to connect much more deeply with my spiritual understanding of the world and beingness and who I might be as a human being on the planet, you know, all of those kind of stories. And yeah, that's just made me really reflect, because I watched you do that. And then you shifted, because then you had to go more internal and small and family unit. And I wonder what that transition was like for you, because, you know, you were community connection, and then close family.
It was very intense.
Yeah.
Yes. It was an intense period of time. It was very all consuming.
Yeah.
In our particular kind of instance, there was a lot of medication that was very complicated, and neither my mum, my brother, nor I are very good at, it was, this one has to be 3 times a day. This one has to be after being eaten. This one has to be 7 times a day. But, so the kind of the schedule of all of that, and it sounds ridiculous, but it was just this, it was all very intense. It was very quick, really, in retrospect. So quite a strange time. And also because we were in this awful, and before that had happened, the awfulness of that particular lockdown, that I kind of found it really felt like Christmas had been taken away, and it's the worst time of year for me, that darkness. So it was quite a sort of low time anyway. It was just keep going, and I couldn't really, it was not jolly. Very, very kind of like step by step. And weirdly, it's not a good thing, but what happened when we found out, firstly, decided to break lockdown initially, just because we didn't really know what was going to happen. I couldn't go into the house to begin with, because my dad was going to go into hospital for a particular operation. But my son and I just drove to Suffolk, and we didn't stay in the house, we stayed in, my mum has a holiday house up near Southwold, and we stayed in that. And it was so naughty, but it was so great to leave and be doing something, to be sort of like doing that. And so then when we then more or less decamped to Suffolk, up and down quite a lot, really. But the first time we went up and it was snowing, and we decided to go and try and get there before, because it was quite a bad snowstorm, especially in East Anglia. So we were driving along, it was fine on the motorways, snowing and sleeting and stuff, but not really, it wasn't a problem. And we got to the outskirts of Ipswich, which is off the main roads. And I was driving along, and it was snowy, and I braked because the traffic lights had turned red, and I didn't stop. So I kind of drifted into the middle of the road, and I was like, oh gosh, the roads are really quite icy here. And so there was, in Ipswich, it's about 5 miles to my parents who live outside of Ipswich, and so it was super treacherous, about 5 miles an hour, 5-10 miles an hour, sort of driving along. And when we got out into the countryside, the snow drifts, and I'm in a little Fiat Panda, and some of the roads are kind of at an angle. I mean, luckily there was not very many other cars about, but I realized, my brakes weren't really working. And we got there, and then we were snowed in for, 4 days. It was quite extraordinary, really, to be with people. We sort of had Christmas then, So even though it was awful, it was also really nice to be with my family. And by that time, we were allowed, okay? So we weren't breaking the law by this point, because in that context, we were doing hospice at home. So you were allowed to travel. We'd have got dispensation, sort of thing. But it was also quite lovely in a weird way to be with them, but quite small, yes, quite intense.
So I'm wondering then, how did your creativity help support you in that moment?
It's I did it actually twice a week. I was, was always once a week with the World Art Journaling with my group, but I did it twice a week. And so by this time my other work had gone online as well. So I had quite a lot of that, but not so much, I can say I can do it from anywhere. It was still another place. It's like a little solace. Doing it is solace because it's a place where the rest of the world doesn't matter, I suppose. So it's creating that space to, when you're immersed in creativity, it's like that alternate world thing. It's a kind of mind space that is very, very present and as such free from worry. So it was solace, I'd say, was what I got from it at that point.
Yeah, and it becomes very real at that point that the need for the solace and the freedom from worry is so crucial to your well-being and helping you to function and just keep going.
Yeah.
I wonder as well, I'd love to ask you, because I've seen your amazing artwork, obviously, and you keep producing more. And I know you're doing an exhibition coming up, or a solo exhibition, aren't you, of your work? I know that you do the wild art journaling process for your processing. But how does that then translate into what becomes one of your amazing canvases for show as a piece of artwork? Because the process is messy, not meant to be shown to anybody. But then you translate that, don't you, into your artwork? Talk us through that process.
Yeah, that's a really interesting. That was a really interesting transition for me. So I started painting. I'd always drawn in sketchbooks. I used to draw people, and I do like still to draw. I find it very meditative. Again, you're just you and the thing that you're looking at, and it's very mindful, and still get into that same mind space. But painting and so exhibiting, yeah, all the art journaling and the painting I did was about that process, loving the process, just loving painting. And what happened was I started to have many paintings and it got to a point I thought, well, maybe I should exhibit some of these paintings and sell some, clear some space so I can do more paintings. Actually, that's literally where it was coming from. So I had an exhibition. I was in a group exhibition with Faye Bridgewater and a woman called Susie Points, and Susie, I've forgotten her name, terrible, brain freeze at that point. Susie Lowe, thank you.
Yeah, I remember the exhibition.
There you go. And so we put it up and it all looked amazing. I was really happy with it. And one of the key things when I'm doing an art journaling, when I'm teaching painting, it's like, look, this is about the process, just about the process. And with art journaling specifically, it's like, this is art. You don't have to show anyone. This is art for your own pleasure. It's not about, here it is, let's put it on a wall, let's judge it, And anyway, so at the moment of the private view, right, people started coming in. I suddenly had this like, oh my God, firstly, it was like, oh my God, everyone else's work is amazing and mine is shit. What am I doing? And it was horrible. And, this is the feeling that stops people making art, right? And this is why I fight against, because, it's like, no, it's so pleasurable, do it, because it doesn't matter if nobody likes it, and, to exhibit is inviting that, isn't it? It's inviting people to come along. And even I looked at it and I judged it harshly. I was like, that is shit. What am I doing? What am I doing? And it was a really interesting experience over that week because it was up for a week. I mean, also people arrived at private view. I had to just front it out, right? I was like, I enjoyed making them. I enjoyed making them. Like, act as if you love them, go on. And then as that week went on, I discovered, I mean, not surprisingly, really, in retrospect, some people didn't like my art. I'd hear them, going, God, look at that one. But other people really did. And that was like, right, okay. So, they're like, oh my God, I love this one. What's this? And this, I see this in it. And you're like, oh, I didn't even see that. That's so exciting. So it was a real learning thing to sort of do that because, it gets judged. But, some people like it. But it's a different thing, really different to wild art journaling, which is super about the process, about your own pleasure, for just enjoying the doing of the thing. And still with a painting as well, I know you're making a painting and it's got that sort of connotation. And so while painting, we paint on big canvases. It's a really similar process. It's all about the layers and kind of moving through that. I don't like this bit, you can change it. You work with acrylic, so you can just transform the painting. It can really move through different ways of being as you kind of move through. And there's still the kind of like going through the stuck and doing something dramatic, and kind of like the ugly phase and how you get past it and all of those things. But there is a more of a, you're not just in it, you're in it and then you step back and you look at it, and then you go back in, and it's more of a sort of talking, looking at it, not self-conscious, but like self-evaluating on it, looking at it and kind of adjusting. So you're kind of also being an observer on it, slightly different. And there's still those things to go through. So like our own inner judge can be brutal. And I had this wonderful quote, which is, as you step up to the canvas to paint, you bring a whole crowd of people with you. And as you paint, they one by one will start to leave the room. So like all the voices that criticize, like the art teacher, that's like, all of that sort of stuff that you bring with you, those voices. Okay, as you paint, they leave the room one by one. And if you're lucky, you go too, right? So that's that sort of point where you're unself-consciously in that flow creating. And that is a very magical place to be.
Yeah, it is.
That's the creative magic part of it.
I'm totally fascinated then. When you move into that observer role, what happens for you, and how do you know when you're done with it?
That's a really good question. I don't necessarily know in the room with it. Sometimes I just do. And then sometimes I think I'm done and I'll have it hanging around me for a while, or they'll be in the studio. And it's basically, if it's not done, there's a bit of it that annoys me. It'll be like, that bit is just in it. I had this painting, I thought I'd finished it, and then it was up for a while, and there was 3 circles on it that started to look like a really annoying silly face. So it was like, I can't, now I've seen that face, I can't get it out, and it's really annoying. And that painting completely transformed. Like with a lot of my painting, you can still see the other paintings sort of underneath it if you knew what that one was. But I paint over paintings quite a lot, not surprisingly.
Yeah, exactly. Oh, that's interesting. Yeah. So I wonder whether or not the decision that it's finished comes from that internal emotional space that you've processed everything that needs to be processed about this, wherever you are in yourself, or whether it becomes a critical eye in that's enough paint, that's finished properly.
I think it is, in a way, it is more the critical eye, actually, for painting. It is looking at it and feeling that it's sort of balanced, it's got enough interest. I think it is a critical eye. I mean, I like looking at things. So sometimes, I think with learning painting, I mean, the more you do it, the more skillful you are with it. I suppose it's like anything, if you're practicing it. So some of my earlier paintings, some of them I still love. Some of them I'm like, I'm going to paint over that one. So it is that, I don't know. It's really different.
I know what I'd like to ask you, actually. I know that with all of my paintings, I have such an emotional attachment to them, and I've never sold one of my original canvases, but I'm moving into being able to sell original source doodle drawings because I'm feeling a permission and a letting go. But in the opposite way around, when I do one of my source doodles, it's not the critical eye that says it's finished. It is. That's why I asked you the question, because it's whether or not the emotional intensity there's enough gone.
Maybe that's kind of co-current. I don't know. I hadn't thought about it like that. So, perhaps there's an element of that. There's something complete about it.
Yes, there's something complete emotionally at a cellular level for me, at an energetic level.
And
I can look at it. I do look at my abstract acrylics sometimes, and I know what you're saying about the you take a step back, you look at it through squinted eyes, you look at, you know, the black and white version of it when you take a picture of it, you know, just to see whether or not the light is right and there is a balance, like you're saying. And those are really good skills to have if you're creating a painting.
Yeah.
You know, but yeah, the other side, it's kind of equal for me when I paint, but when it's just a drawing, it's just, I knew what I did with my pencils. I like the way my pencils look. It is what it is. And I think that's the process I came to with it. When I started with them, I said, well, I'm just going to spend 30 minutes and I'm going to use it as a meditational space, just like you've been talking about, a space, another world, going into somewhere that's a solace space for yourself. And whatever comes up, whether I like it or not, I'm going to post it on Instagram. And whatever comes up in resistance to that is my work for the day. That's my healing work for the day, you know. So, you know, this is obviously why I love the work that you do, because everything about creation is about process and, you know, getting it out onto the page, out of yourself, and allowing yourself some space, cleared space within yourself, and peeling back more and more layers of yourself. It's fascinating.
Yeah.
Isn't it?
Yeah. And you know, you're right. It's like presenting it to the world is, it's just another level of that, really, because that will bring up stuff for you.
I know. I love how you were really vulnerably sharing there about what that meant for you, for people to see your work. And you actually then realize, wow, people are going to stand there and they're going to project how they see the world onto what you've painted. And it isn't actually a judgment of you. It's a statement of where they are.
Yeah, really, or, you know, and everybody's got their own preferences and you know, all sorts of, you know. But it's interesting when you talk about selling a painting. So firstly, I put my prices up so that if I sold my favorite painting, I wouldn't mind so much.
Okay.
So that's one of the things I did. And my favorite painting, what happened to it was quite interesting, because it's called Blue Angel. It's still on my website because my website needs updating. And it was very popular, actually. Lots of people liked it. And I got one of those, I now know, and I recognize it instantly, as total scams. Like, hi, my name is Captain Joby. I am from wherever he was from. And my wife is really interested in your buying a painting from your website, blah, blah, blah. If you get that, it's a kind of stock phrase. It's some kind of weird scam anyway. So, and I had a coach at the time. It's like, why are you thinking this? Why do you immediately think it's a scam? And I was like, I just think it is, you know, it's really odd. I want to spend this much on a painting. That's not why you buy a painting anyway. And she was like, well, maybe you're wrong. Maybe that's just it. Anyway, so I went along with it for a while until it got to this point where, like, I had to pay for shipping for it to be sent somewhere in the Ukraine. And I was like, I'm not paying for shipping, you know, that's going to cost me £700, you know, and they wanted to pay me by check. And I was like, no, okay, I'm just not that's not how I work. You want the painting, it's going to cost you this much to buy it, and it will cost you £700 to ship it, and you pay me my PayPal, please. And then I didn't hear from them again, you know, or got very cross because it was his wife's anniversary, got crosser and crosser, but it's like, no, it's not what's happening. And the one thing that really bothered me is it's one of my favorite paintings. So I don't want you to have it. You don't care what the painting is. You're just saying you want to spend this much money on a painting. No, I didn't want him to buy it. Regardless, even if it wasn't a scam, I was like, I don't want you having this painting. It's my favorite painting. I love this painting. You don't appreciate it, really. There wasn't that feeling there. So I was very, very glad that person wasn't a real person and didn't want to buy it. And then really shortly afterwards, somebody, I think I put it on Pinterest, I shared it on Facebook, somebody said, I love this painting, I want it. How much is it? And I said how much it was. They said, I know it, I want it, I'm going to buy it. And I thought, oh, I've got to clear up the edges. She was like, no. She came around to look at it. She was like, oh yeah, I love it. There's something I need to kind of clear up the edges or something. She was like, no, I really like it just as it is. And I want to buy it. It really is. And when she said, it's like, when I look at it, I just feel, and she kind of like moved her hands and kind of breathed in. And it was like, it's like, oh, she gets it, right? It's about that feeling. The feeling I had when I painted it, she got that feeling. And that was quite a magical moment, actually. And I was like, yes, she can have it.
Oh,
she can have it. She's allowed.
I love that, Moyra, because, you know, we're often on this podcast, we're talking about how the individual can, you know, step into experiencing how creativity supports their own well-being when they're doing it. But we, you know, must also acknowledge that the level of well-being that can come from appreciation of somebody else's work, where you can identify and align with something that you can't quite put your finger on, you know, something, there's an energy in it, there's a color, there's a shared meaning between the two of you. What a wonderful experience.
Yeah, and it's valuable, and people will, you know, that's why art costs money, because it's valuable. I had a painting. It's not there at the moment because I've put all my stuff up, need to hang out around the house. But I bought it many years ago, and I had to pay in installments, and it was, you know, way more money than I really had, to be fair. Like, you know, I think I paid £800 for painting when, like, 25 years ago. Anyway, you know, every time I look at it, it lifts my spirits, right? That's over all of that time. And still I look at it, yeah, you know,
that's when you know that artist was in it, in their zone, with no fakery, with no superficiality of producing an image to sell. That's when you know, if it hits you emotionally, that they were there when they were doing it, and that's the message that they've put out, and it's hit you. Connected.
Yeah.
I love that. Love that. Oh, Moyra, what a wonderful conversation. I love talking art with you. You're one of my inspirations in terms of, you know, being able to just get on with the big canvases, because that's my aspiration, to get on with these big canvases. And I started teeny because I had canvas paralysis. I realized I had canvas paralysis, and it doesn't happen to me when I'm drawing, but it happened to me when I was going back to the painting, and I've started again. And it suddenly started coming, because all I needed was my permission to choose the color palette that made my heart sing and just get it on something. And so I rooted out all these tiny little canvas boards that I had, and I've started them. So you are definitely one of the people that's inspired me to do that, to be that free with that. So huge thanks.
That makes me very happy, because like I said, I want to be like creative firestarter. It's about bringing art back to life.
Art yourself alive.
There you go. That's the one. Bringing art back to life. And it is a life thing. It's a life energy thing. And anyone can do it as well. That's what and it's really magical to do it. And you don't have to be, you know, so-called good. It's not about that. It's about getting into that connection, into that zone where you don't care whether it's good or not, in a way.
And I'm glad you've made that distinction between, you know, doing it for your own sake and your own pleasure, and then the very separate role of being an artist that sells their work. Two very different things. And I think it's really important to get that mindset understood, that creativity, everyday creativity, is absolutely for everybody. Absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, it's very key for the art journals. The fact is that you don't have to show anyone your art journaling. It was nice, and it was a bit of a revelation doing it on Zoom, because some people just have their camera off, and for them it was just great to not be in a class of people all looking at each other's work, you know, because that can be intimidating. And it really is about, this is your thing. I mean, you know, I have other ways people letting go of that sort of preciousness, but you can do it for yourself. And it's just doodling. You see, doodling, isn't it? It's like anyone can doodle. Doodling is great. You just doodle for a while. Wonderful.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's conclude then this wonderful conversation. And if there's anybody out there listening who's been, you know, wondering how they might give themselves permission to access some really messy, destructive, chaotic kind of creativity where it doesn't matter what it looks like, what would you say to them to help them get started on that journey for themselves?
I do use this one actually, and it's actually what you do is you get your lovely sketchbook, and I'd love to open it on the middle where you're not supposed to, and get a pencil or some crayons and scribble. You know, it's just brilliant. Like you can't do scribbling neatly or beautifully. It's just like different level, you know, thicknesses and pressures, and just get into a really good scribble. It's absolutely brilliant, cathartic. So you can start there.
Oh, I like that, because automatically what you're doing is you're breaking rules from the very beginning, because you're opening the book from the middle.
Yes.
So you're breaking that whole linear patterning understanding of I must start here and then I must end here, and there has to be an order to things, and there doesn't. In fact, if there's an order to things, that's not what creativity is. So I love that. Absolutely.
You can do it on the front page if you like. I'm not kind of like nobody's judging you, but like scribbling is really, really great. And you know, if you look at some of the most expensive artists there are around, there's a lot of scribbling going on. So it's like, what's good? This is it. It's not about whether it's good or bad. It's, did you enjoy that? That really matters. Yeah. And I think so. Art is a human need. We need it on lots of different levels. And being a participant, being a creator is part of being alive. And humans need to express themselves. And we are mark makers. We really enjoy it.
Yeah.
I'm convinced it's a need. So
I'm convinced it's a need too. I could not have said that better myself. Oh my goodness. Thank you so much, Moyra. This has been a really lovely conversation. And I really hope that the listeners are inspired to pick up something and to be as simple or as crazy or as chaotic as they can be, and to just look at their own challenges in their own life and think about the simplest things that they might want to look for an answer for, and give themselves a little space to do that, right up into the bigger things that, are much more dominant and perhaps more intense in their life. Because when you start small and you get into a little habit and you have a wonderful process that keeps you sane and keeps you in a nice space of reflection and calmness, then you can really see how you can deal with anything that comes your way, because you've got yourself a little toolkit. And I love that.
Yeah, it is. It's a little toolkit. Just get yourself a little sketchbook.
Yeah.
And don't show anybody what you're doing, but just have fun. And doodling lovely, beautiful swirls, just as valid.
Well,
try them all out.
Sell me on doodles.
I'm not selling you. I'm not talking to you. I'm talking to your listeners. I know you like doodles.
Oh, well, that's brilliant. What I will do, Moyra, is I will put all of your links underneath where this podcast airs, and really encourage, the listeners to go and check out Moyra and her work. She's still doing online wild art journaling, so that wherever you are in the world listening to this, you might be able to access that. If you're in Brighton or local to Brighton, can get here, then you can take advantage of Moyra's fabulous in-person workshops that have started again. So thank you so much again. And
pleasure, Vikki. It was really good to have a good old chat about all of that. And thank you very much.
You're very welcome. Lovely to have you on.